We've got a situation. We all remember, of course, the murder of Terri Schiavo, and that's what it is. Don't let anybody tell you that they just allowed this woman to naturally die. They murdered her. The state of Florida murdered her. And they did it, like as you were saying, and they did it slowly over a period of.
It was one of the saddest things that we went through being here on the street. I know
we couldn't do that to a dog. Right. We'd be put in prison if we did that to a dog. Well, her brother, Bobbi Schindler, who I think we all know, is come out and made some statements about how the church was involved in that particular deal, kind of behind the scenes. And Bobby joins us today. Hello, Bobby.
Hi. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being with us today. You've made some pretty bold statements here about some of the things that church leaders, if you want to call them that, and theologians were doing behind the scenes that caused the murder of your sister. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, and not so behind the scenes. We had a Catholic priest. Well, as you all know, as you said, Terri was starving, dehydrated to death over a period of almost 2 weeks. And during the original trial in January 2000, deciding whether Terri's feeding tube should be removed or not, a Catholic priest testified on behalf of Michael Schiavo and said that it was church teaching permittable to remove Terri's feeding tube, which is patently false. It's contrary to Catholic Church teaching. Nevertheless, this renegade priest, Father Gerard Murphy, testified that it was to Catholic teaching to remove Terri's feeding tube, describing it as extraordinary care, which it is not.
Well, he's the one who actually helped the judge. Is that correct? He counseled with the Judge Greer.
That's correct. In fact, when in Judge Greer's ruling, he had mentioned how candid he thought Father Murphy was in his testimony, helping him come to this decision. I just like to always add to remind people, because there is a tremendous amount of confusion on Terri's, not only her case, but in particular her condition. Terri was not dying. She was not being supported by any types of machines. Her brain injury the brain injury that she had was not going to kill her. She would have lived a normal lifespan. She was physically healthy. The only thing that was sustaining Terri was the same thing sustaining all of us, and that was food and water, something the church recognizes as basic care, not extraordinary care, not medical treatment or artificial life support.
Well, it's amazing to me that they were trying to make this case that what was happening to her was some sort of heroic methods to keep her alive, and that food and hydration is this something abnormal.
Right.
But these liberals don't seem to mind then that we're going to go, and I agree that we should feed the hungry. But when we go out and feed the hungry or the homeless on the street, are we taking outrageous measures there?
Extraordinary means to keep the homeless alive.
Right.
Not to mention her parents would have gladly done it without any problems at all.
Fighting, begging, pleading. There were 100 families there that were willing to take Terri in, and many like her.
I say once again, I would not want to be in that priest's place on the final day of judgment. I was hungry. You did not feed me. Thirsty. Right. You did not give me water.
Absolutely.
And here's a priest who's not going to give water and not give nourishment. Oh, that's a dangerous position to be in.
Well, Bobby, he was not the only one. You call him a renegade, which obviously he is. And, of course, the question I'd have is, why didn't Greer contact, if he wanted the Catholic position, why go to this guy? Why not contact the Vatican and see what their position would have been?
Well, unfortunately, the representation we had back in the original trial did not bring any testimony in from any other priest or bishops to rebut Father Murphy's testimony. So we went out looking for it ourselves to do it publicly. Unfortunately, though, our local bishop, Bishop Robert Lynch, would not support our family and basically stood silent during the time we were fighting to save Terri's life. And pretty much the bishops stood, our bishops in the United States also refused to come out and speak out against what was happening to Terri, except for a few. And then, of course, the mainstream media loved to interview all these other priests that were also supporting the death of my sister. And it was just, as you can imagine, our family was shocked and could not believe that we were fighting against... Our family was Catholic, by the way. We were raised Catholic. Terri was a practicing Catholic before she collapsed. Our family was in shock that we were having to fight the people that should have been there supporting us.
Listen to what he said. The church stood silent, and we were all there on the streets there in Pinellas Park. And by and large, the churches in Florida were silent. The churches across the nation were silent. Now, and thankfully, there were several hundred people that did rally to Terri's cause and came to the streets. However, if those streets were flooded with just the members of the churches of Pinellas Park or St. Petersburg or Tampa, There's no way Terri's death could have been allowed if the church simply stood up. But across the board, the churches are silent on euthanasia, and they've been widely silent on abortion.
Well, and Bobby, you point out here that Richard McBrien, who I've had a run-in with several years ago, professor of theology at Notre Dame, came out and supported the idea of murdering your sister.
Yes.
And of course, he's been a problem of long standing in the abortion battle. But this is incredible. I mean,
well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
No, I know. I don't know how they can continue to dissent and be out there publicly making these statements. There's also Father Paris and Father O'Rourke. Father Paris out of Boston College, Father O'Rourke out of Loyola College. The Pope came out with a March 2004 allocution clarifying this wasn't new teaching, clarifying the position of the Catholic Church on food and hydration. And it was, if you read his allocution, it is crystal clear. If someone is not dying and are only being sustained by food and water, you can label them anything you want. It doesn't matter. We are morally obligated to care for these people and do not consider feeding tubes as anything extraordinary or anything that would resemble medical treatment.
But you know, I would make the argument that when the American church, and let's don't pick on just the Catholics. I mean, I'm Southern Baptist, you're Southern Baptist. You know, they're every bit as guilty as these people. Every bit as guilty. If these churches hadn't taken a powder on the abortion issue, they wouldn't have been set up to take a powder on this sort of situation. But once you cross that line, once you can honestly say, they're going to kill these babies by the millions, and I'm going to step aside and let it happen,
right.
Once you've crossed that line, then this makes perfect sense. This is just the natural extension of that.
You're used to being a coward at that point.
Right.
You're used to being silent and ignoring the tragedy and the suffering that's beside you.
And by the way, you hit the nail on the head right there. I've said this time and time again, and even some pro-lifers get mad at me for this. The missing ingredient with the church is not education. I get so sick and tired of hearing people come up to me and say, well, we just got to educate these people. Right. Nonsense. The missing ingredient is character and courage. They don't have either the character or the courage to fight for the unborn or to fight for even somebody that's born, like Terri. They just don't have it.
Right.
The whole problem is there are too many Christians that are outright scared. You know, just y'all are saying it too nicely. Not enough courage.
Yeah, and
these people are scared.
And soccer and
right.
Yeah, and being comfortable. The late Pastor Luther Lake said something once to the leaders of Operation Rescue years ago. They were saying, we were thinking that, boy, if the church just came out, we were really thinking the church was going to come out. And I remember what Luther Lake said. He said, perhaps the church did.
Yeah, that's right. They came out on somebody's...
And he was saying, that's all there is.
Right.
You know, that's a frightening thought. It just may not be, people may think they're Christians. People may call themselves Catholics.
silence.
But are they really?
Right. Well, you touch on something we don't have time to get into too deeply, but you're touching on something that I used to teach in my old life activist seminar, and that is people say that the abortion issue has split the church. My argument is not. It has unified the church, yes, and it has identified who the real church is.
Yes.
And that's basically what he was saying, is that maybe the church did come out. And that's the few people, the remnant we see standing in front of the abortion clinics and getting involved in the abortion battle. Maybe that's them.
Wonder what these people, these players here would want if they were in Terri Schiavo's situation.
Well, you know what they'd want.
Life.
Right. They want somebody to rescue them. But she was real easy to write off.
Oh, yeah.
Real easy to write off.
This is frightening because I can hear Bobby's heart in this one. And I'm looking at this, Brian, you said you had to debate it.
Oh,
and
I
this
had
guy
a
is a
run-in with him years
professor
ago.
at Notre Dame.
Professor of theology.
It's not right.
I mean, can you imagine then what are the students under him learning?
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, Bobby, I want to ask you a question. I said something at the time. I was on somebody asked me to be on a talk show about your sister while this was all going on, while they were starving her to death. And I said something that got a lot of people angry with me, and one lady called in. She claimed to be on our side of this issue, and she called in and she said, "You'd have never said this if Terri's relatives were around." And I'm going to say it now, and I want to tell you. I want you to tell me if this angers you. I said at the time when they were starving her to death, if we truly had humanity and we were going to kill this young lady, we'd go in there and put a bullet through her head. It would be more humane to do that. We wouldn't do this to a dog. We would not, this country would not stand still if we sit here and said, here's a dog, we're going to starve to death over the next two weeks. It would be more humane to shoot that dog. Why is that different here? Is that incorrect, Bobby?
Well, no, certainly, if you look at it from a humane standpoint, someone had asked me the same question at one time, and I was talking to a friend of mine. You might have heard of Wesley Smith, and I said, Wesley, how would you answer the question if they said, well, wouldn't it have been better just to give your sister a needle? And he said, answer it this way: wouldn't it have been better just to feed your sister?
Right.
And really, that's the answer. We can look at more humane ways of killing Terri, but the humane thing would have been is to give her food and water.
Absolutely. But I'm saying that if we've made the decision and it's irrevocable that we're going to kill her, it would have been more humane to shoot her than it would be to starve her to death over 2 weeks.
Yeah, it depends on how you want to define murder, is exactly, or how you want to go about murdering people in these types of conditions.
The uproar over Michael Vick, the dog situation.
Right.
He's going to prison over dog. Yeah.
He's not going to prison. He's in prison.
He's in? Okay.
If the animal people come out and see you have dogs that are malnourished,
right,
or horses,
those dogs will be taken away, and you will be hauled into the court.
You will be taken to jail. That's right.
Well, someone suggested down at hospice someone should bring a little puppy down there and withhold its food and water, and you would have seen how many groups and advocacy groups would have been out there protesting that this dog was being starved and dehydrated, but yet couldn't care less about what was happening to my sister.
Absolutely. Well, Bobby, you keep up the good fight and say hi to your family, and we do think about you. You haven't been forgotten, believe me.
Well, thank you. I just want to say, I hate to paint a broad brush with all the Catholic clergy. There are a tremendous amount of priests out there that are fighting on this issue. We just don't hear them like we hear about all these dissenters. So.
Right. Well, we know Father Pavone was down there, and there were other priests that went to Florida and stayed there in a vigil. And I think Father Pavone was visiting with your sister every day, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Absolutely. So there are some good clergy out there. I just hope that increases and we start recognizing what's happening in our country today with the brain disabled and the cognitively disabled. Thanks, Mr. Kletchner. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Thank you, Bobby. Bye-bye. Until the church wakes up and decides that it's going to take a stand and the price of it doesn't matter.
Right.
How did we come from, Troy, from a situation we don't have, obviously we know how we came to this. We went from a time when Christ with 12 people who were willing to die and who did die for this cause.
Right.
We've evolved now into this nation of abject cowards running these churches. 99% of the churches in this country are run by complete cowards.
A lot of people say, I read the back of the book and I know who wins.
Right.
Well, if someone would actually go to the back of the book and look at when everybody is being thrown into the lake of fire, the first group of people that are being thrown into hell are cowards.
Right.
And if they would read that portion, we would not be in the situation that we're in today.
Or if they read it and believe it. Yeah. They probably read it.
Yeah.
I heard that saying one time, one day somebody's going to read the Bible and believe it, and it's going to change the world.
Well, my position is that most Christians don't read their Bibles. Right. The Bible is the Word of God. He's speaking to us, and I don't think you can read the Word of God without acting upon it.
And I appreciate Bobby, Terry's brother, because if he doesn't keep this thing alive, they're going to keep killing people.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, it's happened since then, and it's happened before Terri. Terri wasn't the first one, and she wasn't the last one.
Right.
I promise you.